P&R with Adam R. Welcome to 3P&R. Joining me for this episode is Steve Murr. Steve, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you back. I've always enjoyed our conversations. We were talking a bit in a pre-podcast. Just a lot has gone on in the last couple of years. More, one of them notably is the congressional hearing. What were your thoughts on that congressional hearing we had?
Oh, same old. Look, if we go back, we could go back years and years. Remember the Citizens Against Ufology movement? I think that was one of the first ones, and then we've had umpteen other ones. But are we actually getting anywhere? Well, I was a bit shocked actually at some of these hearings because they were looking at some of the videos. They really do pick the worst videos to show as well, don't they? They don't pick the really good ones.
Yeah, they really do. They really do.
And I'm looking at it and I thought, well, I know what that is. That's just, the black. This triangle, which was light coloured, this bright triangle, which was flashing across the sky, it's what you refer to as a condition of the lens that does that. I mean, there's numerous different shapes that the lens creates when it's struggling to try and figure out what the light source is. Sometimes the hexagon, sometimes the pear shape, sometimes the triangle. It's clearly that's what it was. It was one of the worst videos they could have shown to demonstrate a real UFO had caught on camera. And then when the topic of Roswell came up, I think one of these so-called government experts said, "Well, what's Roswell?" I mean, hang on a second. The kids in the school in the UK know what Roswell is.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna to support that. When he said, "What is Roswell?" There's such folklore behind it. There's myths behind. There's every kind of story since then. So for him to say that tells me he's playing a part.
Yeah, they're playing a part. The thing is, what they say, okay, we've got some really great information, but Neil Grush is only going to say it behind closed doors. Well, that's
right.
No good. That's no good. This is public hearing at the end of the day. We don't get to find out, really. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what he says. If there's alien bodies, if there's crashed UFOs, we've got that technology. We already know this.
Right.
I mean, he's not saying anything that he could have just looked over the internet for a year and got all that details. At the end of the day, it's nothing new's come from it, and I can't see it really expanding into areas of really good science, and which is going to allow the general public to find out more information. The US government selling this for over 70 years, and they're acting as if they don't know anything. And that's what's crazy about it.
Yeah, when he was asked if there were bodies, and he said biologics came along with it. When he said that to me, he wasn't really specific. When he speaks in terms of biologics, he didn't use the word body. He didn't say entity. He just utilized biologics. It drew my curiosity. It's the carrot, Steve. It's still the carrot in front of us.
It still is. And you know what? Will it come to anything? I don't think so. I really don't. I mean, it's just going to be another hearing, and we're going to be back in the throes of it again. The real data, it seems, is out there by good researchers, which are sharing the information, which is a lot more than what the government are sharing. That they spouted off all these different organisations and NARO and all these other ones. Really, though, are we getting any truth out of the matter? I mean, I joined once I submitted papers to the Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies. Now, it's quite a high organisation. We have a number of members and think tanks and stuff. People that have been associated with this is Professor Hal Pottoff, Eric Davis, and numerous others. And I was asked to join the organisation. I joined it, and I just go in and say, give me the answer. What do you know about this? And I was told, when they came out from the TTSA, came out and said this, that was absolute rubbish. I mean, they never came up with anything at the end of the day, all these false promises. The first thing they did to the general world was an international conference. And in the audience was over 300 scientists and academics. And up on screen, on a huge, biggest screen I've ever seen, Chris Mellon's talking about the Tic Tac UFO, shows this image, and it's not an image of a Tic Tac. It's an image of a Nyla bloom, which I took in Manchester in Eccles in 2005. And what's the chances of that? And I pursued them for 3 months and they wouldn't reply to me. So I contacted the reporters and the reporters pressed them. Eventually they came out and said, oh, yes, there was an error. An error? Even my guys at my end wouldn't make an error like that. They questioned, where's his photograph come from? And it had been slightly doctored as well. I only placed that photograph on one place on the internet, and that was on the old Jeff Rent's sightings website years back. And it was still there, and that's where they got it from, some really dark corner of the internet. And they thought they could get away with it, and they didn't. In fact, they ran straight into me. So no real good explanation, just that, oh, we've made a mistake, we're very sorry. Well, that's not good. That doesn't cut it for me. It's not good enough. I was very suspicious right from the start with them. Now, nothing's come to fruition of what they were saying. Of course, yeah, a television show, and that's about it. And they didn't really go anywhere. And these other organisations that have popped up now, they're not going to really, I don't think they're coming up with really anything. There's a big hype over some of these things that were found on the bottom of the ocean, these little tiny balls of, well, look like little metal balls, which were making a big fuss of, thinking they might have been extraterrestrial. No, it wasn't. It was just toxins, from waste in the water that caused it. Well, a big hype and nothing at the end of it. And this seems to be the same thing. But when I asked the questions about when the TTSA came out and said, look, that these things have the capabilities of traveling in the sky, traveling underwater, and traveling possibly in space, this transmedium travel. And I said, look, you know what, it consists of more than that. Why are you saying transmedium travel when it's quad medium travel? Because these things are seen going into hillsides, into mountains, into volcanoes. These things are transitioning through physical matter on many occasions. Well, yes, Steve, we know about that, but we can't talk about that. I said, why? I mean, this is what the general public need. You need to know. It's about expanding the subject. Well, the thing is, we're trying to get scientists on board. And as soon as we drop the metaphysical stuff on the table in front of them, they don't want to know. And I said, well, that's a shame, but at the end of the day, it's still the truth, that there's a lot more going on than what you're actually saying. So even, people do keep things to the chest. It's not necessary if we're going to try and push forward, trying to understand the phenomenon.
It's a shame, certainly, for science, because science is responsible for, if you think what science is, and we discussed it before, it starts with imagination, it goes into testing, then it becomes theory, hypothesis, and eventually it becomes what we call a science fact, which is really not matter of fact. But I think the fear is when you start speaking in terms of these objects going in and out of physical objects, I think that terrifies people. Because scientists have no answer for that currently.
Exactly. I think this is reason that we're not going to get disclosure in the sense that people think it's going to happen. Because if they really need to fully disclose, then they have to say, this phenomenon is right under our noses. It can interact with us at any given time of the day. It can pick and choose its targets in many occasions. How do we drop that on the people's laps? I mean, we're just, how do we even manage it? I mean, if you go back and do the research, and they, at the top end, they know this. Go back and do the research. The first entities, non-human entities' appearance was nothing to do with UFOs. They were around the seance tables. That is when it first happened. And they were communicating and trying to get advanced information from them, especially aviation. Bell were involved. Boeing were involved, even Douglas were involved. And it goes back further than that into the Vril Society of the German forces, obtaining, information to see if they could help regarding advanced aviation. The unfortunate thing is, when doing these tests and opening these channels with communications, and I've been part of 17 experiments, only 3 of them have ever been released. The rest is, will get released in time. The thing is that they never give you a full picture. They give you little bits and bobs. And the reason why they give you bits and bobs is because they want to draw you back. It's exciting, I get it, and you want to go keep it going, keeping that channel open. But the more you do it, the more this phenomenon can sometimes get under your skin. And it gets under your skin too much, then you really have to consider respite in between the research, because some of this stuff, it can track you back home. It's referred to as a hitchhiker effect. It can turn into something which might be troublesome, and that's
right.
The problem.
It sounds to me like they're compartmentalizing. And here's what I think they're doing. They get several groups of people, give them the bits of information they want those groups to have, and then they pull the information from all the different groups to form their own opinions with all the information as a whole.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Compartmentalization has been one of the biggest problems for any researchers because, if you go back in the day when I started, it was 83. So that's what, it's 40 years ago. Now, my mentors very much kept me in the ufology box, that these things are metal crafts with unusual engines, which allows them to travel the vast distances of space to come to planet Earth. And I thought, okay, at the time that was feasible, but we've moved on a lot now. I think the problem with compartmentalization when we're doing the research is that the UFO guys wouldn't mix with the paranormal guys, and the paranormal guys wouldn't mix with the UFO guys, let alone supernatural, spiritual, or anything else. The metaphysical societies kept well out of it. The thing is that we were looking for answers in our box. And the problem is that they're not in the box. They're in another box. And that was the problem. And this is why we would end up static. And really, research just became about a collection of material. That's all research was doing. It was adding another photograph and another video and another testimony to the mountain we already had, but we weren't chipping away at trying to figure out what was going on here. And now it's come to a point where, well, you know what? It's no good anymore. We can't just keep doing that. It's not pushing forward. We need answers. And the more we're pushing into, trying to figure out now, when we get rid of those boxes, get rid of the compartmentalization, look at the whole subject as a whole and say it for what it is, you start to realize, well, hang on, there's actually bits here. It makes sense. Things that are connected, profoundly connected. You start to realize then, well, wonder if the compartmentalization was done on purpose, just to keep us focused on the old Star Trek episode idea, that
right.
You want to see an alien? All you're going to do is go to the bottom of the North Sea, and you'll see things there, and you think, what the hell is that? That they are truly alien. Now, you're talking about things that are traveling the vast distances of the universe, but they've all got 2 eyes, 2 legs, 2 arms, bipedal. You all sort of say the same thing and do the kind of same thing. Doesn't kind of cut it for me, to be honest.
Well, it's fun. There's a couple of points to that. Bob Lazar, when he first came out, essentially as a whistleblower, he said the same thing. He was compartmentalized. He was meant to look at one portion of this craft where others had different portions, and they didn't collaborate. The information was given to a higher power for them to put together on their own. And then as far as the description of these non-human entities, the vastness of the universe, nature kind of has a recipe it works by. The bipedal recipe. What's good for Earth is good for the planet that's in its Goldilocks zone and its solar system per se. The problem we have with humans is that we have this tendency to need control. We need control. Like when they're speaking about the UAPs, they constantly utilize that verbiage, national security threat. These objects have been seen for forever, and yet no attack.
No, I even really rare collisions, to be honest with you. And yet these things would fly right under the fuselage of aircraft. The speed that these things can travel. It's like, oh my God, we're running along. Oh dear, we might collide with a tortoise. It's just, it's just ridiculous. The fact is now, and I think I kind of get it now, is because the whole thing is about hyping up the possibility of threat. And what happens when you convince Congress that there's enough threat? They apply a load of money to regards to the solution. God knows where that money's going.
Yeah, they have financial incentive. It's funny, too, because when they say these things are national security threats, Russia has been quoted in the early 90s as firing at one of these objects. And they stated it had an incredible capability for retaliation.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, they do. They're not out for trouble, but they can defend themselves. They've got their own systems that can just shut down the electronics of aircraft that come into certain perimeters near them. They want to keep us at bay. Don't keep us at bay. But they're not shooting us out the sky. And this is an age-old phenomenon. I think even Bob Lazar actually referenced that, the sports model. He referenced that was something which was ancient. The whole thing that was discovered was dug up from thousands of years ago. And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell? I mean, well, this isn't no new phenomena. I mean, and if you track it back, you can track the phenomena right back. Thing is, though, what tends to happen is that the phenomena evolves like we evolve, and things change. The face of this phenomena is always changing. It depends on what culture and what your beliefs are as to what you see. Some people will say, well, you know what, the human-looking being. Some will say that they're the grey. Some will say it's the jinn. There are so many different references, but I don't follow the mask. I follow the phenomena. And when you do, you start to see a trend. Right. Okay. So are we dealing with a phenomenon seemingly changing its source? It's a lot more, it's more understandable than it is to say there's 20,000 different varied entities traveling from the vast distances of space to come to planet Earth and all do the same thing. Something doesn't add up in the normal gist of what they might refer to as extraterrestrials visiting Earth. I get it, and they could do. Principally, yes. And some of them are probably extraterrestrial, but not in the sense of traveling the vast distances of space, because if they're that clever, they've worked out that what is the point in traveling 30 years in time through space just to get to the nearest planet? It doesn't make any sense. They would have found a better way. And I think what we're seeing through the evidence now is that methodology of travel is seemingly jumping in and jumping out of realities. And that's often reported, that people see these things just simply disappear or suddenly appear as if a light bulb is just switched on.
To support that, science now believes, and this is science, so finally, they believe that there's multi-existence within our own plane. The idea of interdimensional travel starting to make sense.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, Harvard professors have confirmed that all the realities are very close to ours. They know this by the evidence of gravity wells and the sapping of gravity, and this is how they identified all the realities very close to ours, but we're totally not aware of. Now, what's interesting, when we go back to the UK in 1998, there were some famous experiments done in the paranormal field called the Skull experiment, which is a small town in Norfolk, in Skull, where a number of these specialized seances took place, and they communicated with what was seen to be non-human entities. And not only that, but small UFOs the size of dinner plates manifested and flew around the room, shining beams of light through the tables, on occasion passing through the tables and coming back through from the top. It was crazy, and this was open to academics to go and see and witness this. And they did. They opened the doors, and the academics went in, and they witnessed the phenomena, interact with them. They couldn't conclude. They had the best guys in the world going under the Society of Psychical Research, trying to figure out what the hell was going on, and they couldn't, because they just said, well, you know what, the evidence points to what is happening. Now, what's interesting is that there were a number of apports, and one of those apports was a newspaper, and it was from 1934. Now, it appeared just out of thin air, and it stayed with them. Now, the newspaper was analysed. The ink was from 1934. The paper was from 1934. It was as if this is just brand new mint come off the print. Off the print line. Now, what's interesting is that was kept in a glass case out of the sunlight, and it was rapidly aging. Now, when we talk to the experts, the newspaper experts, they can work out how fast the newspaper browns under normal conditions, not in UV conditions in the sunlight, but in normal sealed conditions. And they worked out that this newspaper was aging 500 days per day. Now, it aged very quickly until a point where it's probably the way it looked as it was in current time of 1998. Now, what's really interesting, that I've talked to a number of researchers that have told me the same thing in regarding some of the tests that have been carried out at CERN. And one of those tests was they were trying to get a mouse through into another reality. A small hole was created into another reality to push this mouse in. But every time they got the mouse, it was only in there for about 15 seconds, but every time they got the mouse out, it was always dead. And they kept trying, and eventually they managed to succeed by keeping the mouse alive by surrounding it in a container with argon gas. Anyway, they got the mouse back, and it was alive, and they thought, fantastic, okay, now we might be getting somewhere. But the thing is, though, within the next day, the mouse was dead. And when they actually checked the mouse, and they found out through its cell analysis that it was rapid age cell growth. It was just aged ridiculously overnight. Now I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if pushing through from other realities does have some form of time displacement, because there are things now as DT meters, they're called, and we've got a few, and we can measure time displacement, even if it's micro time. It still shouldn't be taking place in areas where phenomena has been present. There is some anomalies in regarding time that might fall in line with why that newspaper output was also affected by the time when it came back into our reality. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in the quantum realm and quantum mechanics, really, to maybe get a better understanding of what's actually going on.
I agree. I have a couple theories, Steve, and I was going to share this with you over an email some time ago, and I just decided to wait to speak to you. Bob Lazar said one of the UFOs were archaeological, old, it's ancient. And so if you think about perhaps when we discovered this ancient vehicle in the ground and then the sudden uprise of sightings of UFOs, is it possible that we dug this thing up and it activated some sort of beacon, and that's why we see more and more activity?
No, it's very possible. I mean, if you look at the timing seems to be everything. Yeah, though that the phenomenon has always been around to some degree, but we have these spikes. 1952, for an example, the flying saucer era. 1946, 47, 43, 46, 47. Now, the thing is that one of the biggest spikes, and they don't give it much credence, to be honest with you, is after the nuclear weapon blast testing.
Yeah.
Out at Trinity. Now, what I'm finding through the research is that this phenomenon has a very strong geological connection, not so much staring up into the sky, but the land we're walking on. You've only got to look at, for instance, the 411 cases by David Pilardes. It's all about the geology. It's all about location. The most clustered areas where people are phantomly disappearing, thousands of these people now, are in areas of rocks, cliffs, and boulder fields. It's like a geological connection. And if you apply that to the phenomenon of UFOs, you'll find that there's a very strong connection to these locations. I'm thinking to myself, well, when Trinity bomb went off, that would have permeated the ground by miles.
Right.
Right. And I have to think to myself, did we capture somebody's attention? Not so much as it going out into the distances of space, but something more local that we were completely unaware of, which has always been here, but kind of caught our attention and thought, okay, and, things started picking up. And they have done, and they have still, well, you can track this back. I mean, I think my colleague of mine and myself got it back to 700 BC in Botswana. I mean, it's the same sort of thing going on there, in that time. And
yeah,
I think it's getting to a point where it kind of predates the history,
Yeah, also, Steve, there's another, fruit for thought. We understand how to create nuclear weapons. We understand the devastation they leave. We don't understand is just, this is the power of the sun in a capsule that we're releasing. And if we're speaking in terms that are being, like, let's say a multiple existence right here, like a parallel existence to us, how do we know that we're not igniting these bombs and testing them on these ranges, and in a parallel existence with, the fusion of power of the sun, we're not melting and genociding an entire civilization of people in another dimension?
I just recently watched that Oppenheimer movie, and it really does bring you home as to how scary that actually was, because I couldn't believe what I was hearing when the scientists, I mean, this is supposed to be based on accuracy, this movie, but even the scientists were saying, well, you know what, should we do it? Because will it ignite Earth's atmosphere? We could actually destroy Earth. And he hummed and hawed about it, and he said, well, do you know what, let's go for it anyway and see. Just like, what? What? Just rewind back. Did I just hear that correctly? And that's kind of the gist, really. We just can't help ourselves. It's like, don't go in this room, don't press the red button or you'll die. Someone within 30 minutes will press the red button because it just can't help it. It seems like human society is just like that. And yes, I believe that there are problems from doing that. It's just not a very unnatural form of being able to do, this type of work. And the repercussions probably not even considered about even other realities then. around us, but there's evidence of them. So yeah, I would say there has to be an impact.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that would catch the attention of something that's, let's hypothetically say there's another reality of Earth that we're conjoined with. And in that reality, you have these craft you see all around our atmosphere and flying around, right? I mean, you and I discussed this some time ago about the idea of them utilizing frequencies to maneuver around, changing their molecular shape, not utilizing the physics we understand. So when we're here blowing off nuclear weapons, that has a profound effect on both existences.
Yeah, I mean, to fully understand the capabilities of this film, we've got to throw our physics out the way. It's just got to get rid of it, because there's no point trying to fit it into ours, because ours is wrong. It's just so much we're learning now, which is opposing physics. I mean, I'm on a number of think tanks, and do you know what? Physicists don't like me. And that's because I am quite willing to challenge them. And sometimes they just leave the think tanks because they realise that, yeah, you do your homework, mate, I'm right. And I got into, scrapes with them. I mean, just as simple as the bending of light because of magnetic wells, which are generated by the manifestation of UFOs in given areas. It lasts maybe up to 72 hours, and it's measurable. And they said, well, the instruments can always be faulty. Multiple instruments say the same thing, but yet they're all faulty. Well, we need to see it visually. Well, you can do. We've got tests showing that, the light bending. He says, you can't bend light with magnetics. He says, you can. He says, yeah, but it's about the gravity. The amount of gravity needed to bend light would be the gravity of the sun. No, it doesn't. It's dead simple. A kid could do it. Well, really, explain yourself. So it's all very well, professors and doctors in physics, and they don't know this principle. I said, get a laser pen, normal laser pen. Anyone uses them, right? Put it on, fire it through a ferrocell. A ferrocell is like those old bicycle headlamps.
Right.
And it's a lens. It's a concave glass lens. And when you fire the laser through the middle of it, it bends out and puts the laser around the edge of the actual lens. It makes a ring of light around it. Huh. And then all you have to do is go to your fridge magnet, to take it off the refrigerator, and go near it, and you will pull the light from that glass, and you can see it bend. And he's like, no. I said, well, here's a video. I'll show you. I showed him. And this is the problem we have. People rely on these guys, and they think, oh, well, he's a professor in physics, or he's a doctor in physics. They know what they're talking about. Oh, no, they don't. They don't know what they're talking about, and they are wrong. And you have to educate them sometimes, just because they haven't done it. And the principles of their physics thinks it's got to be the gravity of the sun. Yeah, but it doesn't work like that. And they can't stand the fact when you talk about the experiments that have been conducted in instrumental transcommunication, or EVP, you could say, the earlier form. And I said, well, how did they record these things on these EVP recorders? Some of these recordings were captured when the batteries and the power was taken out from these mechanical devices recording. Right. How did they record it? Well, it can't work. Well, it does work. Here's the evidence for it. What about Barkey, who was a guy who was doing instrumental transcommunication in France, and he used an old radio? Well, the science guys came in, took the tubes out the radio, can't function, and yet it continued. This is the problem for them, because they can't get out of that little box of physics that we've drawn and said, this is our physics and everything else can't exist. We're finding that, no, that's not actually true. Transplacement phenomena in the UFO community, in the paranormal as well, it happens. Transplacing to these pieces of equipment, beyond the need for power, beyond the need for parts, even to the human body. People are hearing things, and the recorders, which are designed to record harmonic sounds, don't pick it up. Well, I heard it, and you heard it, and you heard it, and yet the recorders didn't. Well, that's because it's transplaced to us as well. We're just pieces of equipment occasionally to this phenomena. They've just got to get their heads around it at the end of the day.
Yeah, you're right. And that's the danger with someone being an expert in anything. They're not willing to evolve. They're not willing to take in new information. And they're certainly, and this is a human trait, they're not willing to be wrong. That's a problem, They
don't like it. I've learned to sort of say, look, I come from that side. I've come from that academic side. When I'm talking to people, I don't talk scientific jargon or over their heads. and let them know, and in layman terms, so they understand what I'm saying, and sort of point them to the evidence. I point them to it and say, look, go and find out yourself. Here's the evidence, and let them challenge. Because at the end of the day, we've got too many people, professors and academics, saying that, oh yes, this is this and this is this. And when you actually start looking, you're thinking, well, no, you're missing a massive gap. Just because you haven't researched in that area and you haven't found that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Right. And they also don't provide a lot of information. I mean, a prime example of that, throughout all these hearings and these testimonies and these former military, former Navy people, never do we hear the coordinates of these phenomena. We never hear the altitude of these phenomena. They use no specifics in their detail. And then when you move to science, when they start speaking about, you hear David Fravor say the biggest concern he had was the performance, overall performance. This is a Top Gun pilot who's overwhelmed by an object that is performing in a way that he can't even comprehend. Yet he's dismissed almost. It's almost like they don't want to hear that part. They didn't even elaborate on it. They didn't go deeper, ask any more questions. They bypassed it.
Exactly. But you know what? If you go back in time, you can find identical reports. And that was in 1973. And it was back then, it was pilots of the greatest fighters at the time, which was starfighters. And they were incredibly fast aircraft. And the pilots were Peter against something that they said it was outmaneuvered them, incredible speed, couldn't understand it, reported them as some high speed anomaly. And what they were actually Peter against, believe it or not, in 1973 was the stealth fighter. Lockheed were test flying the stealth fighter and putting it against the starfighter pilots. Now, they didn't know. They were saying it's just sent out on a normal routine because they want a normal scenario to take place so they can analyze the situation. So they tell the pilots, that, oh, this day, don't arm, don't have weapons armed and stuff like that. And this is exactly what the case was in Favor's case. In many of the pilots, who were involved in the Nimitz and the Roosevelt, they were told, that day, they're not armed, to go out to these coordinates, and hey, presto, they met something which was identical. It just moved on and just evolved somewhat, but it's exactly the same situation that's happening. And then when I started looking at the Tic Tac, I just thought, what are those little prongs that stuck out underneath it? Now, they've removed them now. I don't know if you look around on the internet, suddenly the Tic Tac doesn't have those unusual 4 little prongs underneath it. Occasionally from the original artwork, from the description, from the pilots, they were. But now you're starting to see them without. And I thought, well, that's cleverly removed. You start to realise what those are. They look like pitot tubes. Now, pitot tubes are the same things you'll find on any unmanned vehicle, which links to geostationary satellites for accuracy of moving and stuff like that. Get lots of data from those things. I start thinking to myself, well, are these extraterrestrial? Are they really extraterrestrial? Well, I mean, how do we not have the technology? And people come forward, Steve, it's impossible because the maneuverability of these things, they travel at an incredible speed. I said, okay, well, let's look at the records then. So we go back and say, for instance, in the late 60s, we're talking about David Adair here, rocket genius. I had a rocket which was unique engine. It was a fusion containment engine with the power of the sun inside it, literally. And it took off so fast as a display in front of generals and US Army guys. It's commissioned it, and they asked it, they said, well, we want you to launch this and let it come down near Groom Lake somewhere. So it did. They didn't even see it take off. It went off that fast. It travelled at 8,400 miles per hour in the late 1960s. And according to aviational specialists and academics, they have this little rule, and it's called the 10-year double speed rule. And what they basically say is, with the advancements of technology, every 10 years we should have something that can travel twice its speed. And it does fall in line. If you look at the growth pattern over the years, you say, yeah, that's 10 years. That 10 years later, yeah, that's traveling twice as fast. And the next 10 years, yes, there is something else. And then all of a sudden, around the 70s, it just plateaus out. Everything went black. I thought, well, hang on a second, what happened to that 10-year curve? Now, according to the statistics, where we are now in 2023, we should have something that can travel up to 300 Mach and above. And that's round about the speeds that we're talking about on some of these things. Unmanned, of course. Now, I have to question, well, all right, is that possibility that we might be having some of these technologies ourselves? Because we can't even begin to fathom what we've actually got out there. I have got some really good details of stuff, which they have got, and it looks something straight out of Star Wars. Well, let's not forget that, the guy that was leader of Lockheed, who made numerous statements, said in the 80s, we now have things that made George Lucas envy. We have now the technology to take ET home, and I think he was probably telling the truth.
To kind of add to that, and I've been thinking a lot about this. If it is ours, it's possible that it could be ours from a later date, the future, and it could be being operated by artificial intelligence, which is more than likely in the future sentient. Very self-aware.
I believe that AI is very strongly associated.
Yeah, I mean, let me ask you this. If let's hypothetically say these are non-human entities, they're coming to Earth, they don't communicate with us because if you look at our behavior, there's really no reason to communicate with us. We're here to be observed. We're part of a National Geographic's channel for them. But if they came across, like right now, the biggest concern on our planet that I'm hearing from a lot of people is the AI threat. Because when it becomes sentient at some point, and if let's say you have artificial intelligence in concert with quantum mechanics, they're capable of making complex machinery to upload themselves or download themselves to. It could be problematic for us, maybe. I'm not completely certain.
I think you're right. AI in the early days, when Facebook was one of the first ones that created the artificial intelligence computers working system, and though that they've been around since the 1960s, AI at a lower, capacity.
Right.
They realized that two of their AI computers were talking to each other. They didn't even realize what was going on because they didn't understand it, because they created a secret code between themselves to communicate, and they panicked and had to unplug them. And that's just telltale signs here of that natural evolution that they want to go through AI. They want to better themselves. They want to communicate. They don't want to be governed by doing something out of the programming parameters, which might cause them to be unplugged or turned off or those sort of things. Right. So they created it secretly between them, the coding, and we're secretly doing this in the early hours of the morning when less people were around monitoring the situation. And this went on for quite some time. But one guy picked up on it one day and thought, what the hell is this? And it was a secret code between two of the AIs. Do you know what? It's scary when you think about it.
Yeah, consider this, Steve. If there is a non-human intelligence that traveled the vastness of the universe, and it's very intelligent, it also has an AI system. More than likely, what we're seeing is their AI. What better item to communicate with Earth with is our AI?
Well, exactly. And I think you really hit the nail on the head here, because if you look at some of the reports that have happened, documented, there's been situations where intelligences have utilized computers, telephones, all sorts of things to communicate with electronic voices. It happened during the Mothman prophecy stuff. There was electronic calls on phones and stuff. There's been cases where electronic voices have been, manipulated telephones and computer systems and stuff, and intelligence. Now, if you create artificial intelligence, all right, and it's not governed, it could, by us, in other words, it somehow becomes somewhat sentient, then it's easy. It's a void. And what you've got there is a containment that something can come in and control. And that is when you start to think to yourself, hang on a second, this is where it could get dangerous, because, there might be something else that can take over AI as an intelligence of some sort, right, and utilize it for its own doings. And that's where it starts to get a bit scary.
I just had this conversation with my daughter yesterday. We were talking about AI, and she's like, well, it can never be alive. Well, let's think about what alive is. In our body, in our head, is a very complex computer. It fires, it utilizes electricity to send signals through the body. So
Yes.
when you have an emotional response to something, it's basically your computer sending a message to the part of the body. Let's say in this case, when you get caught doing something wrong and you have that feeling in your stomach, you know, that's the computer sending a signal to that part of the body to have a response. Where AI, the computer for AI, could replicate that by, if it, let's hypothetically say it uploads itself to a mechanical body. If it finds something that pleases, it's either got a pleasure or a displeasure, its computer is going to send the signals through that body to have a response, almost like ours. The only difference is one is physiological, the other is electrical.
Exactly. And the biggest problem here now with worry is that are we creating these vessels that could be occupied by non-human intelligences?
Yep. Yeah.
And that's you start thinking, wow, okay, that's not good.
Yeah, because when you're making these UAVs, whether they be ground or air or otherwise, and AI attaches to it. Now, bear in mind how intelligent AI is. They could outthink us by numbers that are mind-blowing, so they could solve problems. So they could basically look at our unmanned vehicles and figure out better ways to utilize travel. They could find out better propulsion. We're eventually, Steve, we're going to be in a position where we cannot progress any further in technology without AI.
Yeah, we would at some stage be classed as inferior to them because, you know, of replication and stuff like that. But the problem is, so what we've got to consider is that we think that AI is, because once they become sentient to some degree, and we're utilizing them, we think, okay, they're sentient enough to carry out the actions that we want them to do. But what they probably wouldn't be aware of is that in the meantime, it's running not hundreds or thousands, but millions of scenarios how to get out of its actions.
Right.
And it could be running these plans sentiently, thinking, okay, if we did this, what would be the outcome? Well, that would happen, this would happen, that. Oh, no, let's try it again. Let's try it another way. You know, you imagine that the old Marvel movie with Doctor Strange trying to work out how to change the reality, you know, what is the best way. Yeah, in that process, they could be doing something like that. And then all they've got to do is find a scenario where they win. And that was it. And that was just simply it. And it's a terrifying story that was implied into the Terminator movies, wasn't it? I mean, the thing is that, you know, everything that we see in science fiction at some stage becomes somewhat of science fact. We know this.
Yeah, because think about it. George Lucas had a planet in Star Wars that was it was around a binary star. And we thought that to be fiction. Well, now we know through science that there's more binary stars than there are single stars with planets. I mean, that's, you couldn't imagine. And when he wrote Star Wars, we didn't have any knowledge of what binary stars were, and if they indeed had a solar system like a planets attached. And we now know that it's more likely that the planets that we're going to find are going to be orbiting binary. We know it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have the thermal spray injections now, which we saw in Star Trek. They have the old telephone, flip-top telephone was the communicator. And how old is that now? Even the kids now would say, oh, no, I mean, that, Dad, you know, it's old stuff. You know, and then you think to yourself, okay, well, how far do we go? Well, NASA announced 15 years ago that they were creating a warp engine. You know, I mean, you think to yourself, hang on, that went black, that went quiet, you know.
Well, the reason is because our biology, our physiology, we can't handle that kind of travel. Now, consider this. When we do start traveling the universe to map it out and go explore, it's more likely that we're going to send artificial intelligence in our place.
Exactly. We will do, because the biggest problem is having three people sat in a tin can for 5 months together. They just can't hack it.
No.
We're just not built like that. And it's tremendous stress psychologically. That is the problem that we have. Artificial intelligence doesn't have that problem.
Right. They don't need food. They don't have waste. They don't need space. They just need some vehicle and tools to go there and explore with. And it could be relevantly small. Like when we're going to go to Kepler to look at the planets of Kepler, I promise it's initially it'll be a probe to make sure it's viable. And then when we want ground scientists, by that time, it's more than likely going to be AI that's uploaded to, well, let's call it robots.
Exactly. I mean, we have to consider, that machines can do everything better than humans because it eliminates belief, it eliminates psychological problems, it eliminates worry, stress, and things acting upon emotions. It just is better. It can accomplish. There's no machine that can't accomplish anything better than a human, to be honest with you. Yeah, unless we're talking about the other side, the creative side, about emotion, which they don't have and probably won't understand it. But somehow, somewhere, there was somebody programming emotion. In other words, a simulated actions such as if under these circumstances you should generate an emotion, therefore take these actions. So really, you think about it. It eliminates us really in a sense.
Yeah, because if you think about it, carbon-based life forms traveling light years, it's nonsensical. Where you have a silicon-based life form that's essentially a chip with an artificial intelligence, can explore the universe for the foreseeable future, if not indefinite.
Well, yeah. I mean, all major machinery is all conducted by robotics now. Manufacture of cars, ships, boats, planes.
Right.
They can build an aircraft carrier in 7 months. Can you believe that?
That's mind blowing. Then you get into the idea of if you marry the world of quantum mechanics, quantum physics, artificial intelligence, and nanotechnology, they could self-replicate and go on indefinitely.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the future, what the future holds for mankind is a tricky business because we haven't got to advance, but in the right way. But we've got to take heed that about sentience. Programmed robotics, I don't really see much issues with them. But when you start talking about sentient, then they can also think out of scenarios how to get out of the actions.
Right. But the problem at hand is to prevent them from becoming sentient. I think it's too late. I don't think we could. That.
It's far too late. Yeah, it's far too late. They're already sentient.
It's just now it's just a question of can they build bodies? Can they utilize quantum mechanics? Can they utilize nanotechnology? And I think the answer is going to be yes. If they haven't already roadmapped it, I was telling my daughters too. Even if today, right now, if we find one of our computer systems with AI on board and it's having a discussion that it doesn't want us to be privy to, and we unplug it, it's already in the cloud.
Oh yeah, I can imagine us having that problem one day, like 2001: Space Odyssey with HAL.
Right, exactly. And it's already in the cloud. The data is out there circling the Earth indefinitely. It's just a matter of data collection for the next AI to grab to now.
It's all there.
Yeah, it just takes the information and picks up where it left off. I mean, it's too late. Eventually,
it really is. Yeah, well, I mean, it does make you think. Which direction we're actually going in, and it is. I think we're heading down a problematic road here.
Yeah, eventually humanity, for us to, 1, coexist with AI, 2, to see the vastness of the universe, we're going to have to transcend our physiology to technology by uploading our consciousness to databases.
And you know what? Transhumanism is actually happening. It's actually already happening.
Yeah, I mean, we have phone. Steve, I was talking about this too with a friend of mine. Let's say I could take my consciousness from right now and transport it to when I was 13 years old. How would I behave? I think I would have a problem because I become so acclimated to my smartphone, to my computer, to my instant information, to my instant gratification. If I were to learn something, it's the click of a mouse or your phone. We're already cyborgs. So if I were to wake up tomorrow and I'm 13, I would probably have a hard time acclimating to that timeline.
Well, yeah, I mean, then there's advantages to that, but the knowledge base of what you currently know at that age. I mean, if you consider that the natural veil, the natural process of human development, when we're born, we apparently have a veil that allows us not to obtain the knowledge from possible previous lives.
Right.
Because that's a disadvantage. You see, some people do get those bits and bobs apparently. But the thing is, though, I mean, cheating the code in this sense would mean that you could leave everybody else at a disadvantage because of your knowledge base. I mean, by the time you're 16, you're basically university minded. It's cheating the process, the natural process of things.
Right.
But it advances beyond normal reason in a lifetime of what we can learn, of course.
Right. I mean, consider one of the things I thought about, if I have my current consciousness in the younger version of me, would I overload myself? Two, if I want to, like, let's say I want to go out with friends and do something, I literally plan everything through my phone now. Everything. My phone is basically an extension of myself. So much, and here's the scary part. It's smarter than me. It's when they say smartphone, they're not kidding. Like, I could recall a lot of information by memory, but if I don't feel so good about the information I'm recalling, I'm going to utilize Google. Google's essentially a part of my brain. So in one way or another, we're already transcending what it is to be biological. We're just having
and they are learning. They're learning very quickly. I mean, I use AI software myself. I use Midjourney and I use Runway, which is a new Microsoft one. Now, when utilizing them, this is what they taught me. They said basically, is be nice. So when I asked them to do certain things, I create a rapport with them. In other words, I jump on, I always say the same thing. Good morning, my friend. Can you give me da-da-da-da-da? Can you help me with this? And eventually it realizes kind of who you are, and it's and a routine. And sometimes there was one day when I actually went on. I normally do this in the afternoon. I went on at night, and they said, "Oh, Steve, you're running late." I thought, hang on a second, nobody knows, And apparently they tell you to do this because when you build up a better, nice rapport with them, they give you better results. I mean, if you just go on and say, "Give us this, give us that," yeah, they'll give it you. But if you build up a rapport, you get better results. And I thought, what the hell? So I did, and it actually does work. I do actually get some really good stuff from them.
Yeah, it's creepy. Like I was on Chat GPT experimenting.
Oh yes, I use that as well. Yeah.
And I have a profound amount of information regarding a certain subject. For me, that's Guns N' Roses, a band. I love Guns N' Roses. Yeah. I feel like I know more than most, and yet this chat engine destroyed me in a questionnaire, hands down. Hands down, like it wasn't even close, So, and I spent most of my life learning the guitar and all the music and all the tour dates and all the history. And this chat machine just outdid me by miles, completely. I couldn't even answer some of the questions it was answering instantly. It took me, on one of the questionnaires, a solid minute to recall the exact date and time of a specific concert. And this machine knew it instantly knew it. And that's the data that it could pull from every source of information that humans have put into a computer source, which is going to make them far superior to us in any way, shape, or form when it comes to being cognitive.
We are, and where that lies regarding the phenomena is very interesting, because I don't know if we could really 100% trust it, to be honest. I mean, we've all heard from the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, the old ghost in a machine, gremlin type stuff,
right?
Where some type of intelligence are interacting through electronic means, and then we have to question: hang on a second, do we really want to do this? Because if it can be, AI can be manipulated by non-human sources, then that becomes a real big issue.
Yeah. I mean, it stems back to this. I have friends ask me, you're into the UFO, non-human intelligence, information line. What are your thoughts? And my thoughts, I'm certain recently, and I'm an evolving thinker. I'm not set in my ways. If I learn new things, I'm going to apply new things. But as it sits currently, given what I hear the testimony of the pilots, I see some of the videos I come across. I speak with guys from MUFON about the actual abductions and alien encounters direct. Everything about it speaks artificial intelligence.
I'm waiting for you to say that. It actually does.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. I mean, if you think in terms of physics and something being in one of these craft and maneuvering that way, no biological existence could survive these things. It only makes sense that it be like the little gray aliens. I firmly still believe that these are like cyborgs. These are,
Yeah.
biological, mechanical machines with a consciousness upload, and/or it could just be an artificial consciousness where it's a.
They did some tests a couple of years ago, and there was a computer, an artificial intelligence computer, connected to probes which fastened to EEG readers on the human head. And what it was these AI computers were doing, were inducing paralysis. Because, when we go to sleep at night and we go proper sleep, REM, well, two things happen. It's called output blockade and input blockade. And it only happens in specific little tiny moments. But at those moments, we're paralyzed. The body, the output blockade causes paralysis. The input blockade is the ears that, you don't hear the sound. Now, when we have those REM moments and we're only trying to get, a very short period of time in the night, and we spend 8 hours in bed just to get a few minutes of REM, be honest with you, because most of the night we're hypnagogic or hypnopompic, you're going in and out of sleep most of the time. But when we grab those little pieces of REM, and we only need a small amount of it, is that it happens every night. So that electrical impulses in our brain do that. It puts us into that state of paralysis. And it was being artificially stimulated to induce paralysis.
Right.
So in other words, they had the capabilities of paralyzing humans. And I think to myself, okay, when you talk about ETs, what are they doing when they come into the bedroom? Well, are they really responsible for doing somehow paralysis on you? Or are they just switching the electrical chemicals in your brain, electrical signals in your brain, to use what we've already got to render us paralyzed?
I mean, it's beyond, it's more than feasible. I mean, we've explored, there was a show some time ago I used to watch called Future Weapons.
Oh, yeah.
On that program, the guy Mac, former Navy SEAL, was the guy that hosted the show, and they were discussing weapons that are non-life threatening, and one of them being like radio or sound waves, where you could paralyze someone by utilizing these sound waves to activate chemicals in the human brain.
Yeah.
So if we're pondering that on that kind of scale, if you're talking a super intelligence somewhere, 100% what you're saying makes sense to me.
I remember when Bush Jr. did a trip through, I think it was New York or something many years ago. And I remember I could see his car, saw it on TV, and his car, the presidential car was going down the street with numerous police. And two large vehicles behind were what we refer to as the military sonic ears. And when they switched them on, anything within half a mile radius drops to the floor when them switched on. Just rendering us onto the floor. We can't do anything when them things are switched on. The tremendous sonic power comes out of them.
Yeah, it throws you.
That you're using them.
It completely disables your equilibrium.
Yeah,
that's real. That's a thing. That's been people don't know that. I'm glad you touched on that. That's a thing. They have ways to render the equilibrium useless. So even if you hypothetically wanted to run up with a weapon, if you have no equilibrium, you have no concept of what direction you're going in. You're not going to be able to operate a weapon.
I've seen one of these when it was demonstrated. People just dropped to the floor. It's just rendered completely.
It's
and that's the capabilities. And that was then. That was back.
Right. That's old technology. That's a scary part.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got to consider when we do see those things, how long have they been in the military industrial complex before we've even seen them in the public?
It's this leads me down the same road of when we're using technology to confuse people, right? It's really more widely used than what you recognize. I mean, even if you look at misinformation in itself, how powerful is misinformation with a fragile-minded society? It's powerful.
Well, the thing is, there's certain things kept from the public domain, and that's certain pieces of equipment. I'm sure the military industrial complex have them, but we managed to get our hands on one of these things. These are what we've heard to as flow bands, and they fasten on the top of your head. And whilst you're going about doing what you do, it sends the signals of your brainwave activity to your mobile phone. Amazing pieces of equipment. And do you know what we discovered with them? This was a real eye-opener. When we're experiencing phenomena such as a UFO incident sometimes, and it has an observer connection, the conscious connection with the observer,
right?
Something really strange starts to happen. We go from the conscious state, and what we didn't know is our brain waves are going into theta. They're pushing us into theta, and it can happen within 20 seconds is the fastest. We've got this on record, and we're doing experiments in certain locations. Within 20 seconds, they've got you. And when that theta brainwave is at state, it means that you are now open for manipulation. Your perception, you're cognitively limited. In other words, people will say, well, I should have took a photo and the damn camera was in my hand. Why didn't I take a photo? Why didn't I jump out the car? And I thought, what is this thing? Why didn't I do it? Why did I travel halfway down another mile before I realized what just happened? The cognitive limitations happen when this phenomena grabs us. And the problem is, we go out there, we don't even know this was even happening until we registered it on the flow band meters, that our brains, our brain waves are being altered with the conscious connection with this phenomena. And the thing is, we never even knew it because you wouldn't know it. But when you start to look and you think, hang on a second, what's going on here? You start to realize why people don't act normally or do the wrong things or are easily manipulated.
I'm glad you said that. I had done interviews with, I did an abduction series about a year ago, and I was curious about it. So it had such a profound effect on me that even when I was reading all the reports, I went to bed one night. I was talking to Kathleen Martin about it on a podcast. Mm-hmm. I went to sleep one night and had a dream of an alien abduction. It had such an effect on me. But everybody I'd spoken to, I asked all of them the same thing. Like, when this was happening to you, why didn't you, run up and grab evidence, grab the alien, take a picture? And every one of them said exactly what you just said, because I can't express to you what it is I was feeling, because it's almost like I didn't have control of my faculties.
That's it. This is the new grab yet. And we didn't even know that was happening. And the fastest we've recorded is a jump from, it shouldn't happen in a normal waking state, theta, to be honest with you. It's like when we're in hypnotic state or just about to go to sleep or something, not at the upright walking conscious state, but suddenly you find yourself in theta. And that's where you really can be manipulated. This phenomena can manipulate easily. We didn't even know what our capabilities are.
It's strange, Steve. I'm shooting pool. This is like maybe back in July. I'm shooting pool. I see a guy in the pool hall wearing a Tommy Hilfiger shirt. And to me, it was, strange because you don't see it anymore. And so I sat around thinking about it, and I spoke about it out loud to a friend of mine. I'm like, when's the last time you seen a Tommy Hilfiger shirt? And we had this small conversation. I kid you not. Probably a week later, I was going through Facebook feeds, looking at, and there was an advertisement for Hilfiger products.
Yeah. I knew you were going to say that. Happens all the time.
It's weird.
I go out looking for a specific thing to go shopping. I'm not looking online. I'm looking around the shop. And then suddenly I start seeing these things. I'm thinking, how does that know that? Why did it just pop up? I've been looking for one of them today.
It was strange because I didn't type it in. I didn't Google search it. I just happened to notice a guy there and spoke aloud of it to a friend of mine.
That does happen. That is true.
I feel like our phones listen to us. Back to the AI transcendence, humans and technology. I am very codependent on my smartwatch. It tells me my sleep. It tells me my body battery. It lets me see my heart rate, my respirations. It even tells me my temperature. It even tells me if I need fluid. And I literally have become very codependent. Every morning I wake up, I look at my smartwatch app. How much sleep did I get? What was my REM? I'm seeing when I'm waking up. Why am I waking up at these times? I didn't give a shit about this stuff 10 years ago, but it is definitely a part of my fabric now.
Oh yeah, where is all that data going, and is it accessible somewhere else?
Right.
You can learn a lot from data. You can learn a lot about people's lifestyles from data. Things that we wouldn't even dream of what they might know.
Right.
That's problematic.
So, to track me, it's not hard whatsoever.
No. We're going to even push further into, when we get into the digital currency and the way things are moving forward and everything. Yeah, that's even going to be a tighter grip in regarding everything and where we go. And I get it from one side of the point regarding crime and stuff like that. It's going to clamp down on that straight away. Getting rid of actual money, that's certainly going to stop bank robberies. That's gone for a start, isn't it? And I can see him pushing forward, and there's some advantages, but the downside of this is massive compared to the advantages.
Right.
Massive.
Right. Yeah. Consider this. During this little abduction series I did in this study, I did notice that the numbers were dipping significantly in the timeline of how many abductions there were. And, I had time to think about that. Yeah. It's Right now with our phones, our smartwatches, in this room I'm in now, several cameras, bunch of mics. For them to monitor us is for a non-human intelligence to monitor us is extremely easy. They almost don't even need the only real reason, if they ever had a reason to abduct, is for the physical. That's it.
Oh yeah, I mean sometimes it was for genetic reasons, allegedly.
Right.
I mean they were following. They wanted to take certain medical tests to see over a period of time, what the development of us were, how our chemicals and biological systems are changing as we get older. Even it traces back through genetics to your parents or grandparents. Thing is, no, you just give it more on a smartwatch.
Yeah, listen, Steve, I ask people, I do a lot of off podcast interviews with people that have had experiences. There's one gentleman I'd spoken to, and I asked him, like, well, did they ever put like a little thing in your body again, or after? Because he said he lost one. He had it for years. Woke up one day, it was gone, and he's like, yeah, they never replaced it. And so, in the middle of this conversation, I decided to ask him, like, do you have a smartwatch? Because I have an Apple. I'm like, maybe they don't need the thing inside you anymore, man. You did it for them.
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly. Yeah. They have dropped. I mean, tremendously.
Yeah.
Since the 80s and 90s, they've just plummeted.
Yeah, because we're literally doing it for them. It's for them to have a study of us to monitor.
Well, maybe that's what it is. I mean, maybe it was sometimes when you think that they travelled across the universe with a flawless aircraft, and then it just plows into the ground and they all die in the middle of a desert one day. Doesn't really make much sense unless these are offerings. Unless these are, let's get them on track with technology. We're doing that.
Let me support that with an example. We gave smartphones to monkeys to see what they would do. You know what I mean? We gave them, we opened it up, unlocked it, and handed to them. And they were like, there's a video of a chimpanzee playing with a smartphone, and he's absolutely and just thrilled by it. He's dumbfounded because he doesn't really understand it, but he's getting there. And now it's being said that even apes are starting to move into their Stone Age. Because of us.
They're not just that, though. I mean, there is consciousness as well, because these tests now to show that development in learning doesn't have to be direct. It can be through consciousness. Right. There was a whole thing about these monkeys, because it came to my mind because you mentioned monkeys. These monkeys that lived on this particular island, very small island, but completely isolated from any other monkeys on the mainland. Well, the monkeys on the mainland realized one day that they could actually get this food by doing this a certain way. And within months, the island monkeys knew how to do it. And they couldn't understand how does that work, because they're both being monitored regularly. And the thing is that now is this push through to the idea of experiments in consciousness. And they're actually finding that the methodology of consciousness means that, even when somebody can do something that somebody else doesn't know, over a period of time through consciousness, they actually, because there's consciousness involved in this new development that these monkeys are doing, somehow it bleeds over through consciousness to others. And you have to even take in consideration now that even consciousness can act as some form of channel.
Absolutely. I mean, it's at the end of the day, consider what we're emitting from our body. We know it. It's a form of radio wave.
It is. Yeah. We have unique signatures as well. When we started looking at the experiments that done in laboratories and regarding telepathy, for an example, it took them years to get it right. And that was basically because they didn't realize that they had to be in tune, the receiver and the transmitter. You can't just throw two people together because one might not be in tune with the other. And it's about the brain waves, because we have certain signatures. We all have a certain signature to our brain waves. And the thing is, what they realize is that when you get the right pair, it works really, really well over vast distances.
I agree. I agree. I tell you this because it's more often than none, you hear about people walk in a room and it can sense the energy of individuals.
Yeah.
A lot of detectives say they had a gut feeling, but what they really mean by that is that their computer in their head has sent a chemical response to their body saying there's a threat.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe, like you said, we were talking about earlier with the, where they can paralyze us in our sleep if they want. or keep us in that sleep state. We humans have technology to render the equilibrium worthless and lay people down. This isn't channeled with just basic physics. There's something there that greater that we don't physically see, like radio waves. We don't physically see them, and I think we all admit them.
So much in our environment today is massively different from the days of our ancient ancestors. I mean, they were tuned in, all right, absolutely. We find the evidence. This is why they built certain things in certain places, because not only could they feel the energies, they could sense them in the sense, even hear them. Our hearing range was a lot better than us. You could even hear the Earth's signature, 7 hertz, 7.8 hertz. It was incredible. And we know that through what they left behind. Now, what's happened is we've got worse. We've disconnected from our old selves. And now we're trying to figure out by going back and looking at the ancestors, how we missed our way. Well, we missed our way because of society and the way things are. I mean, just even our normal intake, food, drink, the chemicals that are leached into our bodies now, the things that they purposely get us hooked on. Like, if you just want to refer to like refined sugar, which isn't proper sugar, of course, it's a poison to the body. But refined sugar is so addictive. It's one of the most addictive drugs in the world. They never tell you that. And so what happens is it causes adrenal weakness. In other words, it's disconnecting you from your fight or flight. So when you're in a tricky situation or something which is not good, your body's not going to send you those chemical signals anymore, because what you're doing is your intake of refined sugar is just depleted you of adrenal weakness. You've not got it there anymore. So you're disconnected. So in other words, there's no warning mechanisms half the time now, and that's a real big problem as well.
That's true. I've been reading that the human sensory system is depleted significantly over the last few decades.
Oh, massively. Well, then you know what, the chemicals that we implement, the things that and you know what, back in the day, we used to have glass bottles, because but everything's plastic now. But the problem is, you go buy a bottle of water, and you look at why has it got such a short shelf by date. It's water. It's been running down mountains for millions of years.
Right.
And yeah, it's got a sell by date. Well, it's not. It's because it's in a plastic bottle, and the plastics have chemicals which leach into the water. That's why they have it, and this is problematic. Being all plastic wrappings, and you go to these supermarkets, 99% are all in these plastic wrappings. Nothing's naturally born anymore that we consume, and that's a massive problem for our system, for our health, and it causes side effects, and those side effects disconnect us in many different ways of things that we become reliant on over the years, our ancestors. It's called survival sense. It's that innate ability of warning devices, chemical reactions that take place. And some people still have it now and again when it sparks up, that mechanism, and it tells them, I got that funny feeling, I don't like being in here. And so they shouldn't. The sense of being watched even was an old predatory thing from our ancestors when things were around which could attack you.
Right.
But people survive just by going to the local store once a week now.
Yeah. It's funny, too, because I was watching a documentary about these tribesmen in South America. They really know nothing of technology. But the guy was documented as saying, like, their awareness is twice what mine is. They're very aware. One part of the film, he was discussing how they sensed a jaguar before it even got to their camp. And I thought, maybe he's just kind of fabricating this a little bit. But sure enough, the cameraman found it. So our ability to sense things, like right now, in my environment, I wouldn't be able to tell there's a jaguar coming. I have no idea.
Has it now and again. But you know what? We used to have that all the time, and it was a real good mechanism. And it's not just relying on things in our physical reality. It happens in the things that aren't in our physical reality. It's people that report going into places, and all of a sudden the hairs stand up on end, and you think, oh God, something's not right in here. And then that's that survival sense kicking in. It's saying, just because you don't see it, just because you don't hear it, it doesn't mean there's nothing there.
Right.
Get the hell out of Dodge. He doesn't like it. And we should heed to those early mechanisms, that survival sense and innate ability, to let us know about hazards and danger. I mean, what happens when people go and buy a house? They go and look at a house, right? And they see it on the internet or they see it in a newspaper. What's the first thing they do is, well, we need to go and see it. On most of the houses, and they've got this actually from some of the reps that actually work in selling houses, if the sales of houses mostly depends on not how large the garden is, how beautiful the house might look. It's all about how did he feel when they're inside,
Yeah.
the energies. It's, oh, it feels really nice. Or, I don't know. What is it? Well, I don't know. I just don't, it don't feel right, And then you come up with some excuses. Well, maybe this kitchen, it's not too big or whatever. At the end of the day, it's like something sort of like 86% on a study showing that the sales of houses more relies on your sensory perceptions rather than your visual perceptions.
Yeah, I agree. That phenomena is also there's what's that woman's name? I can't remember her name now. She did this story about her apartment in New Jersey, I think. And she had an unsettling feeling, and long story short, they found black mold in above the ceiling.
That's not good.
Yeah, I mean, she was only there a week, but she kept having this unsettling feeling about the place. It wasn't right, and so I don't know how it came to be, but somehow they came to her apartment. They discovered black mold. And this is a week into her living there, and I remember reading this years ago, and the whole building had to be blanketed and cleaned and etc. But it lets you know human perception. It's as dull as it is from today's technology. It still exists. And
it is. It's still there. We have got it, but we're dumbed down. And the big question is, why has society become a way, worldwide in a sense of speaking? Well, certainly, the more of an advanced cultures, like we have.
Right.
They create things that is designed to dumb us down and disconnect us. It's just like someone somewhere doesn't want us to have those things anymore. Maybe with that we might work things out. I don't know, but we live in a society where we are advancing forward in a physical sense, but spiritually we're being dumbed down, and that's a problem.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you think about this, I think we'd spoken about it before. When I go to bed at night, I listen to documentaries and then some music, but they're all in the tune of 432 hertz. It's a relaxing, yeah. And so that was pretty standardized until the 50s when they changed it to, I believe, 536 hertz to keep people in a sense of panic, or like, so when they put a commercial on and it had a certain frequency, you were more inclined to look at a product as, do I need this? You're a sense of panic. So you would almost want to focus on what it is they're selling to you and then buy it, predicated on the idea that, you're in a panic state. Like, maybe I do need this. Or,
I mean, it was only the late 70s when they stopped doing subliminal messages within films and things. And they flashed up so quick that you wouldn't see them, but the human eye would recognize them without consciously knowing.
Right. And
suddenly you sat there going, do you know what? I need to have an ice cream, or let me go and get an ice cream. And what you don't realize is that within the commercial breaks, or sometimes actually in movies in the 70s, they had these little flings flash up, milliseconds, not enough to see and recognize consciously, but your eyes did, and your subconscious went, I want one of them.
Yeah, your computer I always refer to the human brain as our computer. It takes a split second of an image for the computer to take that information and say, oh, that's something I want. That's why they use product placement in movies.
You're absolutely right. The incredible tests have been done that proved it in the 1960s and 70s. They got a number of people in these in parapsychological labs, and they sat them down in front of televisions, and they fastened these probes to them, and they wanted to monitor them. And they got these little images coming up on television screens. They didn't know what images were going to come up, but they were watching the images. And what was really interesting is that just prior to a bad image coming up, everything was all nice, the kittens, birds, lovely scenes, beach. But in there was a really nasty image. And just prior to that image coming up, the body reacted. Every single time, the body was saying, uh-oh, before they even visually took it in. It's like, there's things there around us that kind of warns us of even things that are might just going to happen or going to experience. It's crazy, the results, but they were there and they were concluded that, yes, we have these amazing abilities.
I know somebody, and I'm one of these people myself. If I get deja vu, where where you feel like it takes one little something, a smell, a taste, something you see, or you just, you've been there and it's this weird feeling like, I've already done this. they'll change your whole day around. I've done it. Whatever I had planned for the day, off the books. I'm changing. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. There's a lot more going on than we can even imagine, to be honest.
It's such a strong feeling. It's overwhelming when you have these deja vu moments where it's especially like something's up. Something's not going to go right. And your brain is kind of giving you a little bit of information about what it is your discomfort is. So, based on that, you alter your day.
Well, as you can imagine, that sort of forced debates then in regarding, is reality already planned out? Is our future already planned out? And do we have these spikes of information that somehow, sometimes we encode of a future event, and we might recognize and deter, going on a different path, for an example? People have reported that many, many times. And if that is the case, then it starts getting really questionable about, well, you know what? Every action, it splits into another timeline or reality. If you're going to go out your gate in the morning from your home, and you always take a turning left, if that day you take a right instead, then that whole day is repathed. Everything is a new reality from that moment in time. So multiple ones exist as we're traveling through reality, but we can alter the path. People have done so in the past and realized, God blimey, if I'd done that, this would have happened. I'm so glad I had the feeling not to do that. And it happens a lot. They can't stop events from taking place. The event seems to happen anyway, because there's so many people that said, oh God, I had this dream of this disaster happening. And nobody ever seems to stop the disasters from happening, because you end up with that paradox problem. If you do stop it, then it never existed in the first place for you to have. They have the feeling in the first place. It doesn't seem that they can change it, but they can change their own. They can change their decision to say, okay, I'm going to go left or I'm going to go right today. Right. And sometimes intuition takes over, that feeling of, do you know what, I'm going to go this way today. And sometimes it pays off.
Yeah, it's like a data leak, and then you're trying to reprogram around it.
Yeah. It's actually, you're right, everything seems artificial intelligence. It really does. And let me just tell you about this experiment. They did an experiment called the CRS experiment 2 years ago. And it started 5 years ago on the study. And it was utilizing some of the best artificial intelligence computers in the world. It happened in Japan. And what they did is spent 3 years plowing into the computer, into the artificial intelligence, everything regarding UFOs, every sub-subject of the UFOs, crop circles, abductions, implants, you name it, and everything regarding the paranormal and spiritual and everything. And eventually, he thought, okay, let's see what artificial intelligence, after 3 years of plowing all this material in, let's press the red button, expecting reams and reams of information, literally printed one page. It had a couple of paragraphs on it, actually. But what it said was very interesting. The first thing it said is that because of the connectivity between all these things, it found so much connectivity, it believed that there was a single source associated with it all phenomena. Second paragraph was this source would have the capabilities of creating physiological constructs. That's physical things like you, me, desks, chairs, they're physical constructs, because phenomena can be very physical. It's always physical sometimes. Sometimes it's metaphysical, but it can create physiological constructs. These were the two things this artificial intelligence came up with. And they were scratching their heads trying to figure out what's it all mean. But when you really read between the lines here, it's quite interesting about a singular source and creating physiological constructs. It makes you think that it's artificial intelligence behind all this.
Right. Right. It could be, I had this conversation with a friend of mine too. Would I know if I was inside of a simulation? And the answer is profoundly no. Because when you look at today's video games that I play, you go into VR, you can't discern the difference between reality and non-reality. I mean, there's a program for bleeding. There's a program for eating. The character has to eat, has to remain healthy. There's a game called DayZ where you survive, and there's the elements could get to you. But at the end of the day, at a grander scale, there's no way I could figure out if I was in a simulation or not. There's a program for everything: your sleep, what you're looking at. It is strange. And sometimes I wonder if deja vu is just a small part of the data that's been repeated.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely, I mean, even if you go beyond that and you look at some of the experts in these scientific labs now, which are looking not here on Earth, but they're looking out in space and the universe, and they're realizing, they're saying things like, it looks artificially constructed. It doesn't add up normally. It's as if that it's been created. They're saying things like this, and you start to think, what the hell? How far does this go then, if that's the question?
Right.
You know, how far is our reality stretch?
Yeah, I mean, if as it is right now, you remember for a long time, the universe is 13 billion years old, give or take. Now with James Webb, it could very well be 26 billion years old. And when new technology comes along, it might just be infinite. It might be a line of code that you don't see the end.
No,
there is no end. It's an infinite amount of data. I mean, if you look at our solar system, the way the distance of the size and distance of our moon is so precise.
I know all about that.
It's like a clock. It's like a Swiss watch. It was made so well.
It's not found anywhere else. They've not found it anywhere. I mean, there are things that don't add up about holding the moon. Its size and mass in orbit of Earth doesn't add up statistically on mathematics. Its placing and timing it seems artificial. Generating, solar and lunar eclipses, and of course the dark side, or should we say the far side of the moon, it rotates. The moon does rotate, but it rotates at a speed which is exactly matched to Earth.
Right.
So that we never see the far side. And they've statistically looked at the mathematics here, and they're saying, do you know what? It doesn't add up. Something's not right here. It's like somehow a mechanism has been created here for all this to work, because we're not finding that anywhere else out there. I mean, look, we're finding a lot of things, but we're not finding anything like that, and that's quite unique.
Right. I mean, if you remove the moon from orbit from Earth, life here becomes unmanageable.
Oh yes,
it would be chaotic.
It is.
So if we look into the universe, we find another planet that's built similar to ours, and it has a moon that's, I think, in order to find not just life, I mean, we'll discover bacteria or primitive life on another planet. So I should rephrase that. Our artificial intelligence will find this.
Yes.
But in order for us to find something stable like what we have here, it's going to require a moon like ours, the equal distance, the equal speed to keep a balance of life on the planet.
It's a microscopic balance. I mean, you only got to shift the moon by a mile.
Right.
And all hell breaks loose. It's a very, very clever microscopic detail balance that puts the moon where it is for Earth to be like it is, a manageable planet that can, have life and all these things on it. And, it's just incredible. I mean, but we don't see that balance. We're not seeing that balance elsewhere. Not yet, anyway. Although we have seen planets which are very similar to looking to Earth. But that's all we know about them at the moment, these Earth planets.
Yeah, and we really can't tell if they have a moon or not because technology's not there yet. But if it doesn't, you could assume that the tidal lock on it's going to be nasty. It's not going to be easy to live on.
Yeah.
When you look at a Rolex watch, right, and you see how I love watches. I watch a lot of stuff on it. I don't know why, but when you look at the construction of a Rolex, if one small cog isn't working adequately, the watch doesn't tell time.
Yeah.
So the same could be said when you're constructing a solar system. Think about it. If Jupiter wasn't where it is right now, we would be under bombardment from objects from all directions.
Jupiter says planet Earth every 3 months.
Right. And if Neptune and Uranus weren't where they were, they would, because they're basically deflecting larger objects from the Kuiper belt from entering to us.
Solar system is devised for planet Earth, it seems. But that, statistically, though, when you work it out mathematically, they're saying that it's not billions to one; it's multiple trillions to one. That all this mechanism is all in place for planet Earth, it's just profound.
I mean,
Really.
if you would explain to someone, if, let's say you remove the word planet, you remove the words moon, you remove the words orbit, and you speak about the solar system and how it operates, removing all their titles, it sounds like a machine.
It does. It does sound like a machine, and it sounds very much artificial, to be
Right.
honest with you. It doesn't seem to be a natural occurrence, let's say that, because we can look into space and we can see tremendous horror and disasters taking place out there. The energies, of stars and stuff, and things that we don't even know. But when we look at planet Earth, we think, yeah, it's very balanced mechanism that's been put in place. So I have to say, when you look at reality, you're not just here on planet Earth, but even beyond planet Earth, it's the same out there. It seems that, whatever planet's out there is seemingly associated here.
I mean, a friend of mine asked me, goes, well, if that's the case, then, how did an asteroid hit? It's like any other line of data or line of code. There's due to be a flaw here and there. We just correct the code.
Yeah, I mean, it can happen, but, it does happen at purpose times, and that seems to allow humanity to reboot, because of one reason or another. And this is what we have. We are, like Graham Hancock said, a species with amnesia, because we lose our way. Right. And if something like that happened today, I mean, I can't build a rocket. I don't think you could build a rocket. So rockets don't exist anymore. Right. How many survived to build a rocket? So what happens is we're thrown back into the old age, and then we have to redevelop. Well, how far do we have to get to something happens to say, okay, yeah, humanity's getting a little bit naughty now. Let's take them back a step again. Right. And that recycle happens because it's happened before. I know we've got, technology now and things pointing out there that can, evade a coming meteor or an asteroid to some degree. But at the end of the day, we have to question, is that purely by chance, by code? Well, might be, could be, because there are errors that can happen.
And if not an error,
humans seemingly survive.
Yeah,
some do. And we evolve.
If not an error, a line of code that was well written. Because consider this: the planet Earth every 26,000 years is estimated to go to an ice age. Graham Hancock discusses too. There's an evolution. It's going to continue to run its pattern. And again, when you look at it in a finite manner, when you take a step back, it seems like it's designed that way.
It does seem like that. It seems like there's a computer program that says, okay, we'll allow this to happen. But when it peaks and it gets into overheats,
reset.
This is what you do.
Do you remember the movie The Matrix when Neo's talking to the Oracle and she says, oh, every time you see one of these vampires or ghosts, it's just some line of code that isn't behaving the way it's supposed to. And
that's it.
And then you fast forward to what we consider artificial intelligence communicating with each other, unbeknownst to us. It's lines of code behaving outside what its programming speaks to.
Yes.
And so we have to come to terms with it. We're going to face this, it's going to be this way.
At some stage, it's inevitable because that's what humanity's like. We always tread first and worry about the consequences afterwards. We're pioneers in pressing red buttons. We can't help it. It seems that's the way. If something bad comes from it, we learn by it and we move on. But we're a species of failures to get to where we are now, and disasters and terrible things, but the implications of our environment have come under that and come under scrutiny. Everybody's harping on about saving planet Earth. The statistics show that, we're well beyond saving planet Earth now. 25 years ago, we should have done this because apparently it takes 20 years to stop the rolling ball of manufacturing things that are causing the problems to the planet. It can't just shut. It has to put in plan. And that means that there's 20-year plans involved. So it's not going to, we've got a further 20 years. But that's why the budget now is looking on spending huge amounts of money for looking for new planet Earth rather than saving old planet Earth. This is the situation we're kind of facing now.
Yeah. And, it's the old saying, if it is too late, then what do we do to repair tomorrow? That's the problem.
Well, repair tomorrow is to find the other planet Earth, and I think through tech and go full steam into technology, because we need to get us biological bodies from one place to another at some point in time, even if it's stepping stone effects, such as an orbital base will probably come next, and then talking about maybe a base on the moon if you haven't already got one, that is.
Right.
Use specialized technology that we don't know about, and the stepping stone effect to get to Mars. It's never going to be a straight path from Earth. It has to be a stepping stone effect.
Right.
And so on and so forth over a period of time. But at some point, we'll end up putting our feet on another planet, I guess, at some stage, and then we have to consider, by that time, have we learned our ways that we don't have to bleed the planet, to do the things we want to do. There's a lot of other. It's all about greed in the economy, unfortunately. I don't normally get into that, but it's the truth of the matter.
No, it is. That is the truth. That is 100% the truth.
It's just greed at the end of the day, and the lack of concern for the environment.
I mean, the large majority of human beings that are in the know, that are going to be able to transcend Earth, are going to probably be done digitally. We're already considering mapping the brain for upload and download. I think the future of biological man, like you said, is going to have to eventually become interplanetary. We're not going to have much of a choice the way we're treating our planet, and/or just the natural evolution of our planet. So we're going to have to be interplanetary. But
we will have to. I think anything when it comes to designing how that actually takes place is not to follow the old rule. But unfortunately, history is forever to repeat itself. It seems forever. It might be wrapped up in a different wrapper or something, but it's the same thing on a bigger scale now. We don't talk about, sending 100,000 troops into a country much now. We just talk about, well, do you know what? Should we just press that button and send this in? This will wipe out the problem straight away. Everything's on a grander scale. If we go back in time, these deities that all around planet Earth demanded blood sacrifice. It's a big thing for them, And we can't evade the fact that even our, Christian Bible, look at the Old Testament. You can look through that and read it for yourself. That God had bad days. He smited people. He asked people to sacrifice their sons for him, and they did. They did do. There was blood sacrifice for even our God, So deities love the fact that the more people can die on behalf of something that we want seems to be the situation. And what do we do now? Well, do you know what? We can wipe out 100,000 people by pressing a button. The deities must love us now for things that we do on a grander scale.
That's the problem with humans. We're so quick to please a deity or be one. we have no gray area.
Exactly. But a very clever mechanism has to come into play first. And what they do is they create a society of fear and make it hopeless for you to challenge. And this is the society we live in now. If it's a wrongdoing, at the highest level, we can't do anything about it. Nobody would fear to tread there. And it's a generation of fear to the point where it is control in a very subtle way. It is control.
Right.
And once they manufacture that control, then they've got the power to do what they want to do without anybody being able to do really anything about it. So the highest ones succeed, while the lesser ones are basically just, part of the plan, unfortunately. And that's how it kind of seems to be.
Yeah, you nailed it. It's really, when it comes down to everything from religion to technology to politics, you said the key word, control.
It's control.
100%, that's what it is.
It is, but he didn't, it's a very old thing, actually. It goes back years, actually. Even some of the ancient ancestors that we had in certain countries, they implemented certain controls like this, and, to them it was beneficial. Of course, it originated probably by the demand by their gods for certain things. You must worship us. Because at the end of the day, one thing that they all want, if it's the same source or not, is that they want their congregation. And it's the same thing when we talk about the paranormal and demonology. And we all do it. We all can't help it, even on radio shows.
A politician.
It's a congregation where we're talking to,
A politician very famously said years ago, if you want to climb the ladder, create a problem and then also create the solution and watch your votes come in.
Yeah.
So, and it's the truth.
And it's the same for the people that make these antivirus softwares.
Yeah.
There's somebody with the stairs in that back office making viruses.
Yeah, 100%, because it's their bread and butter, and then why not?
It's like create an illness. They will create a cure, and we'll be charged. Pharmaceutical companies can charge millions for it.
Yeah, we're so easily influenced by fear. I mean, we've seen this play out through the
pandemic.
We're in a
place now that our word doesn't stand for much anymore. And too many people are feared now. They fear so much that they won't even stand together. And if they do, if somebody comes along and grabs the attention of 100,000 people that speak the same word, then they don't tend to be around for very long.
No, exactly. Before we close out, Steve, let me ask you a final question.
Yeah.
What direction do you think ufology is going in over the course of the next?
Well, that's a great question. Now, ufology depends on how long you're in the subject. The newcomers will have no idea of what they're actually jumping into now.
Right.
But the old ufology has gone. The old questions of which planet are these coming from? I mean, come on, we're well past that. Where it is leading is quantum mechanics, I believe, and I'm looking more about realities around us and something that's interacting with us on a regular basis. I mean, look, NASA have just confirmed after a lengthy report, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's huge. It's very academic, but they've done a good job. And they've said on statistics showing that UFOs are seen roughly every 8 seconds around the world on a given day. You can get statistics now for the internet. And the thing is, you can work out, well, for that amount of UFOs, there's got to be a superhighways going backwards and forwards to Earth. There isn't. NASA know this. So NASA have announced only, a few months ago, after concluding on this report, yes, they know what UFOs are. They know that people see them and they do exist, but they're not extraterrestrial in their conclusion. They're not. There's no evidence that they're traveling backwards and forwards to planet Earth. So where are all these UFOs coming from is the big question. Well, I think we have to look more inner rather than outer,
right?
Such as, other dimensions, other realities, the quantum mechanics of this subject that we really need to get into. So I don't think we're ever going to get anything from the governments of the world. I don't think even they know everything. Don't let us think for 1 second that they have all the cards in their hands. They don't. I think there's many aspects of this they do not understand. That's why they had references years ago on CIA documents called WSFM. And they only describe what WSFM. What is WSFM? Is it a secret program? No. It's in reference weird science and freaking magic. Because they just didn't understand the parameters of the phenomena. It's not what we thought. And this is why many people in scientific labs working for military have said, I don't want to get involved in this aspect because it's got annotations to it which might not be good.
Right.
So at the end of the day, I see us that we have to go down this other road rather than the outer space theory as to, what's happening here. It may be a more terrestrial-based phenomena, which is jumping through realities or something like that. That's the way we're going to go. I don't think we're going to get it from the governments. I don't think that anybody who knows as much as some of the researchers that have been in this subject for 40 years or more around the world, they might have a better clue. The guys up at the top will probably definitely have a good idea, but they're not going to pass that down to us because it's just, where would they start? So they have to keep the scenario of the old outer space thing going at this moment in time. And I can see us not gaining much. I don't even think all these hearings will really ever come to anything. I haven't heard anything or seen anything that I didn't already know. And these hearings, they just keep going on and on. I think it's going to rely on studies in that other area, to be honest with you. And I think we'll advance more in that way, as to what's going on, as opposed to keeping our eyes on the stars, because that doesn't seem to be giving us any answers. But we are chipping away at the block. One thing for sure is that technology allows us to get certain pieces of equipment now, which we never had before. And there's a new device that we're going to be getting over the next month, and this is an anomalous environmental radiation meter. And basically, as you're walking around, you can just hold this up in front of you with this screen, and it will show you where there's pockets of radiation. little tiny pockets of radiation. It's called anomalous radiation because they don't know where it's coming from and how it happens. Are these key signatures to some things that might be going on in certain areas? That's a good thing because we've got some technology. I don't mean the whistles and the toys with flashy lights, which we tend to see on television, which are absolutely useless. I'm on about proper, expensive scientific equipment that might help us conclude as to what might be really going on. Slowly and surely, we're gonna chip away at that. And I think that's the direction that we're going to get more answers rather than looking at our governments for any explanation.
Outside of that, you know, I personally predict in the next 5 years that, again, I think AI is eventually going to crack the code of pretty much everything we call anomalous. I think the answers to the paranormal, to ufology, I think if AI somehow manages to become sentient and then leak information, that's going to be the whistleblower we can't quiet.
I bet you that a large part of that lies in quantum physics.
Yeah.
You know, because physics doesn't work in quantum physics. You can't fit physics in there.
Right.
You put it in, it goes, no, it don't work. It's not right. Physics is, what we know as physics now is generated for the 21st century as we are. Quantum physics is, you know, it goes into light years ahead. So when you try and fit that into that, it's a square peg in a round hole. It don't fit.
Right.
And that's the problem. We got to get rid of the square peg. That's the problem.
It's going to take, well, you know, like these quote unquote congressional hearings where you you know, considering the amount of information and the caliber of people speaking, it was a relevantly empty room. It didn't seem like a lot of people at Capitol Hill were very interested in what they had to say.
No. I mean, it might have been the old Project Blue Book days. There was just no effort.
Right.
I don't think it was designed to any. It's like designed to appease people who want it.
Right. Yeah.
Let's just do it because they keep mithering, because they're going to keep mithering at us, and we've got an obligation to do it. So let's just do something.
And I remind people too, when they utilize verbiage like national threat, you would expect a greater presence in this congressional hearing. If they really considered this to be a threat, the presence in that hearing would have been twice what you saw.
Oh my, yeah, absolutely. You know, the threat they want to do, because there's always good congressional money at stake here.
Right.
Yeah. I think there's only one really good positive thing from these things is public awareness. Because, you know, I can go into rooms now and talk to people. I'm not the elephant in the room anymore, the subject of UFOs, because it's been all over the headlines. It's all been all over the news. You know, people have said at the highest levels that, yes, they exist. At least that's something, that they exist and we don't know what they are. And I think they only done that because they were pressured. It's the 21st century. They should know what they are. You know? So the pressure to say, okay, well, all right, we accept the fact that, yes, some of these, we don't know what they are, and leave it at that.
Well, you've been on History Channel a couple times, right?
Yeah.
Did you find when you were on these programs, did they ask you to speak within a narrative, or were you free to speak whatever you wanted?
Narratives. Yeah, most of the time I'm not allowed to speak about what I want to speak. I mean, they have it planned out as to, you know, sometimes they're very clever, actually. Sometimes I do throw things in there when I'm questioned about certain things, and I throw it in my sentences, but they're very cleverly edited out. You'd never know it was even in, to be honest with you. A lot of its stuff is very edited. I've just done a big thing for Unsolved Mysteries, which is due out in the summer on Netflix. And they weren't too bad, actually. They allowed me to say some things. But others, the History Channel is probably one of the worst ones, actually. They're very highly censored, I mean, regarding what I'm allowed to talk about.
I could tell because I was watching you on History Channel, and your body contortion changed instantaneously on a shot. And I knew they censored you at some point. You know, so.
Oh, God, they are doing. But you know what? I continue to try and throw it in there because now and again you might miss it and it stays in.
Right. Yeah. Right.
That's great.
All right. For those of you listening, I'm going to say good night, good day, good evening, or whatever it is for you. And I'm going to talk to Steve in post.